Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're about to dive into a 500-year-old book that's been called a handbook for tyrants, a guide to glory, and pretty much everything in between. I'm talking, of course, about Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince.
You've definitely heard that word thrown around, right? Machiavellian? But what do we actually mean when we call a leader or even just a tactic Machiavellian?
Well, generally, it's not a compliment. It means you're willing to use any means necessary, no matter how sneaky or cruel, to get power and hang on to it. But is that really the whole story? To figure that out, we've got to look past the label and understand the man who started it all.
So let's peel back the layers, because you can't really understand the book unless you understand the man himself and the totally turbulent world he lived in.
See, Machiavelli wasn't some philosopher sitting in an ivory tower. No way. This guy was in the trenches. For 14 years, he was a top diplomat for the Florentine Republic, dealing with kings and popes, seeing firsthand how the brutal game of power was played. And then it all came to a screeching halt. The powerful Medici family came back to Florence, accused him of conspiracy, and just like that, he was imprisoned, tortured, and exiled from public life.
So there he is, forced into retirement. And what does he do? He writes The Prince. And he dedicates it to the new ruler of Florence, a Medici. He called it a gift, the most valuable thing he owned, all the knowledge he'd gained from his long, dangerous career. It was a practical guide, born from his own personal ruin, written with the hope that maybe he could get back in the game, and maybe, just maybe, see a broken Italy finally united.
So what made this little book so incredibly revolutionary? It was Machiavelli's decision to just completely divorce politics from our usual ideas of morality and religion.
This brings us to his core idea, the reason of the state. What he argued was that for a leader, the rules are just different. Actions that would be considered crimes for you or me, for a ruler they can become necessary duties. Why? Because the only thing that matters is the survival of the state. For the prince, power isn't the means to an end. Power is the end.
And this leads us to one of his most famous questions. Is it better to be loved or to be feared? For Machiavelli, this was a no-brainer. Love, he said, is fickle. It depends on other people, and you can't control that. Fear, on the other hand, that's something a ruler controls directly. So his conclusion? If you can't have both, it is much, much safer to be feared. But, and this is a huge but, you must avoid being hated.
And this quote shows you exactly why. It's chillingly direct. He's saying that people get over an execution faster than they get over you taking their stuff. To avoid being hated, a ruler must never touch the property or the women of his subjects. That is the line you do not cross. Because while fear keeps people in line, hatred is what fuels conspiracies.
To survive, Machiavelli said a leader has to master two completely different sides of his nature. First, there's the way of man, fighting with laws, with reason, the civilized way. But, he says, that's often not going to cut it. So a prince also has to learn to fight like a beast, using pure, raw force. He believed if you rely on only one, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail.
And when you're acting like a beast, he says you have to be two specific animals. You have to be the fox, so you're clever enough to spot the traps. But you also have to be the lion, so you're strong enough to scare off the wolves, your enemies. It means a ruler needs to be cunning, but also needs to have overwhelming strength. And a big part of being the fox? Not keeping your promises if they stop being in your best interest.
So for 500 years, leaders have studied this book. They've used it, and they have absolutely abused these ideas. But the real question is, do they still have a place in our world today? It's really easy to just dismiss all this as, brutal stuff from a bygone era. But here's the surprising part. If you strip away all the 16th century politics, you'll find a lot of Machiavelli's core ideas are actually taught as cutting-edge leadership advice right now.
Think about it. Machiavelli told leaders to handle today's problems before they explode into tomorrow's crises, to use the good times to prepare for the bad times, to learn from other leaders, not just their successes, but their failures too. And this one is huge. He said to build a team that tells you the hard truth, not just what you want to hear. Because a leader is judged by the people they surround themselves with. All of that is timeless advice that's as true in a boardroom today as it was in a court back then.
But let's be real. There's a powerful counter-argument here. If you apply this constant, strategic, power-hungry mindset to your whole life, well, it can get pretty toxic. Like this critic says, if you treat every single interaction like a battle waiting to happen, you're not only going to exhaust yourself, you're going to push away the people you actually care about. It's a worldview where people just become pawns in a constant war for power.
Maybe the most hopeful way to look at it, though, comes from the scholar Maurizio Veroli. He argues that we get Machiavelli totally wrong if we just see him as writing a handbook for tyrants. Instead, he thinks The Prince was actually written for visionaries, for redeemers, leaders who could step into total chaos and forge something new, something stable, something great.
So this leaves us with one last pretty provocative question. 500 years later, do you think leaders still operate by these ruthless rules of power, just hiding them behind a more polished, modern, PR-friendly mask? Or have we genuinely evolved beyond the world that Machiavelli described? That, my friends, is for you to decide.